Welcome to the Bay Insider with Amanda and Ying, where we talk about history, lifestyle, and real estate in the San Francisco Bay Area. Hello, and welcome to the Bay Insider and our second session of the NAR settlement discussion. As promised, I'm here with Ying, and we're going to go over the things that are being implemented and put in place so that we can work through the new situation and the new world that we're living in with these new rules. If you didn't listen to our first session where we talked about kind of the history of the settlement, how we got where we were, and all of those kinds of things, I would recommend going back and listening to that because it can definitely give you a good background. But today we're going to talk about the two main changes that are going to take place, how those are going to be implemented, and then what that's going to mean to buyers and sellers going forward. So Ying, you want to kind of fill everybody in on what the two main changes are here?
Absolutely. So August 17th is a big date for all of us. That's the effective date of the NAR settlement. Now, I want to take one step back. The NAR settlement is the nationwide settlement. However, each state and each local chapter might have their own set of changes. So when you compare chapter to chapter, you might see minor differences. However, at a high level, everyone should be implementing the same two changes. The first one is removal of offer of any compensation in the MLS. And the second one is require all agents working with a buyer to enter a written agreement. Now let's dive in deeper in each of those changes. Removal of offer of any compensation in the MLS, including both listing side and the buy side. In the past, in the system, we used to show both the commission percentage or dollar amount for both sides, right?
Right. So there was a field where you had to put in what percentage was being offered to the buyer's agent. And that's kind of part of the reason that they caught up on NAR with this problem, even though you could put nothing in there, or not nothing, but a penny, $1.
Yeah.
So it's always been negotiable. But because that was a field that was required, that kind of triggered a issue with that. So that actual field will be removed. And any historical data about that field is also going to be removed. So we won't have the historical data about that either.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother thing. But
that's right. I did not even know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yes. And the rules are extremely strict in the sense that in the system, you cannot post a link or any reference to commission or commission percentage.
Or anything that would just happen to mention it. So you have to be very careful and make sure, because it is okay, we should mention, to say these things on other things that are in no way related directly to the MLS. So you can have a single property website, say for 123mainstreet.com, as long as that's not linked in the MLS, it's not against the settlement rules to say that the seller is willing to pay the buyer's agent 2.5% commission or 2% commission or a particular dollar amount.
However, you cannot link that website in the system. So that's the rule. So anything to do with the MLS, there's no reference of commission or commission percentage. In fact, just the word commission is not recommended anymore. We are supposed to say concession.
Yeah, so no commission, no compensation, and then concessions, which they have created a new box for. So basically, when you sign your listing agreement with the seller, if they are open to some sort of concession to the buyer, whether that be a percentage they're paying the buyer's agent broker or a percentage or a dollar amount that they're paying to the buyer to help them with closing costs, that box can be checked. And that is an indication that can be negotiated.
Yes. And we also have some changes to the listing side, which we'll cover at a later time. But in the system itself, yes, there's a new box. Then you will see whether there's a concession the possibility
being considered.
being considered, possibility of a concession.
And there's also, I think we'll definitely see people not being aware of that box, not checking that box. So it's still going to take a lot of communication between listing agents and buyer's agents to truly understand what is happening for each and every transaction in the beginning of this, before people really have a feel for how to navigate it.
Yeah, we can see just lots and lots of phone calls, lots and lots of phone calls between agents, people calling, trying to get info because info is just not available in the system, or it's not easily identifiable. You cannot even have an offline database indicating fee percentage
across brokerages.
Brokerage,
right.
yes.
So there's because that's what they were thinking of doing, right? In the beginning, was creating like a database where the different brokerages could go and put their listings in and mention what compensation, or rather concessions, whatever is being offered to the buyer's agent. But that's kind of been kiboshed.
Yeah, the rules are very strict. I think we get one warning, and then the first real offense is a $5,000 fine. The second one is 10, and I think the third one you strike out, right?
Yeah, you strike out, and I think your whole brokerage strikes out. So they're going to be very strict on this, from the MLS to the brokerage to everybody. And obviously, us agents want to look out for ourselves as well, and don't want to kind of step in it, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we obviously want to be very careful, but I can see a lot of people making a lot of mistakes in the earlier days. So the next several months are going to be very interesting. In addition to that, supposedly there are warning signs everywhere when you enter information in the system. And if you enter words you're not supposed to enter, you're supposed to get warnings. So
doesn't stop you from actually saving it, but at least gives you a warning. And so if you're paying attention and you're a good agent and just made an honest mistake, then you should kind of have an easy way to back out of that situation, which is good. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next several months. And then the second thing is, all the agents working buyers need to enter a written agreement with the buyers prior to touring a home. The written agreement can be defined as different forms. It could be exclusive buyer agency agreement, which is what we prefer. But there are also, you can sign a non-exclusive buyer agency agreement. It could be single property only. It could be multiple properties. It could be transactional. So there are many different variations of the form the buyer and their agents will have to sign before touring a home. Now, the touring the home, Amanda, help me out here. Like, how do we define touring a home?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you make. So, for instance, obviously, if you're going there with your client, then that is your touring with your client. But, as we were talking earlier, and you had mentioned, what about FaceTime tour? Is that touring with a client? And I think the answer is going to be yes, because you're basically showing, who's policing this, what's happening, how did these things get determined? But I think people need to be careful. And I think, it is important that there is an agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agent or representative or person working with them, so that everybody understands that it is a business relationship.
Yes, I mean, it's a good thing. We think it is a good thing, but it's just going to be lots of confusions in the short term. Then a lot of buyer hesitation that we need to work there.
Yes, because I do imagine that there will, and I can appreciate and understand that too. You just met somebody. Do you want to, enter into a contract with them? At the same time, when you work with, say, an attorney, you always have to, sign an agreement to talk to them even the first time.
Not only that, you have to pay retainers.
And exactly. The attorney you have to pay. At least here you're signing an agreement, but unless you buy a house, you're not paying anything. And even then, the seller still may be paying.
And also, it's agreement, like any other contract, it can be canceled. It's not, it's not
a mutual agreement. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, there has to be mutual agreement. There has to be good reason and all that. And there might be some compensation, but it's not a contract that's set in stone. So it's a little different. But that leads to the next question. So for people who are trying to buy or sell a home in the near future, what does that mean to them? What kind of conversations we need to have them as agents? So let's talk about sellers a little bit. I have had several conversations with sellers, potential sellers lately about buyer's agency fee. Or buyers. Let's just call it buyer's agency fee. A lot of sellers are under the impression that they don't need to pay anymore. They don't need to pay buyer's agent's fee anymore because that's up to the buyer. It is true to a certain degree, but I think the question is that to the seller's best interest?
Right. And is that going to net them more money in their pocket, right? Because as we've discussed on our own, ultimately, your agent is going to do a valuation, figure out what is the market value of the property. And then beyond that, it's going to be an offer that's created that represents the value of the property. And if the buyer is paying their own agent, it is likely that they will take that into account and have a lower offer price so that they can pay that amount of money. And it may be that it gets the seller a better offer by agreeing to give some sort of concessions, especially because buyers are having to come up with that money in cash on top of all of the, down payment and closing cost amount that they need to come up with.
Yeah, I mean, this can be fairly complicated, but basically sellers now have the option. Not they didn't have the option before, but now it's very clear that they have the option of paying the entire buyer agency fee, part of the buyer's agency fee, or none of the buyer's agency fee. So it's very important for the sellers to understand their options and what that means with each option they pick. The listing agreement right now actually has addendum for the sellers to decide whether or how much they're going to pay, right?
Yeah. And so, brokerages are coming up with their own listing addendum sheets. And we have one that basically you can set out how much the seller is or is not going to pay the buyer's agent by a percentage, a flat dollar amount, or if they're going to offer concessions up to a certain amount for closing costs or a certain percentage to the buyers. And then if the seller signs that their willingness to have concessions in some respect in that form, then we as the listing agent would check that new box in the MLS saying seller would consider concessions.
That's right. So in our market, a lot of buyers are very stretched. So what happens is they cannot afford a down payment plus their agency fee. And the agency fee is not part of the financing equation yet. Banks eventually will catch up. I mean, it's going to take some time before the banks can finance that fee. But at this particular moment, it has to be cash. So from the seller's perspective, what we're saying is if you hypothetically, let's say, if you say, I do not want to offer any concession to buyers, you are eliminating your buyer's pool by a large percentage.
Additionally, I just want to make one point that I've been hearing a lot lately is that buyers in their contracts are going to have the option to say, do not show me any homes where concessions are not offered.
Exactly.
And then so that could completely stop the amount of people that are actually even getting exposure to your property.
And the amount of exposure is where you drive the traffic, you drive the interest level, and drive up the price. So the seller really need to consider that part very carefully. At the end of the day, the commission, all the fees related to the transaction are baked in the price people pay. It's either part of purchase price or it's in addition to the purchase price. And we are not saying, nobody is saying at this point that buyer's agents should get paid at zero. buyer's agent shouldn't get paid at all, right? We're not saying that. We're just saying that the structure needs to change. And maybe there are more different ways buyer's agents get paid. Maybe there are different dollar amounts buyer's agents get paid. But the bottom line is someone has to pay it somewhere.
Yeah. And the thing that we've talked about that we have some concerns over is that especially the most vulnerable types of buyers, the new home buyers, the first time home buyers, right? Who maybe aren't as savvy, don't have as much understanding of the market, don't have as much cash on hand, may find themselves looking to alternatives like a limited type of representation or a discount brokerage, or doing what's called dual agency and being represented by the seller's agent, the same person who then can no longer be a fiduciary to both sides and is just like a neutral third party shuffling papers.
Yeah, it's very transactional and it's not represent your best interest.
So that's our concern. We, ultimately, Ying and I are very much looking out for our clients and fiduciaries for our clients. Many of the agents, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, are of the same mind. Unfortunately, there are some bad players in the real estate world, and those are the reasons we find ourselves where we are today. But ultimately, we are going to try to do whatever we can to get our sellers the best possible price for their home and our buyers the best possible deal when they buy a home, and making sure that they are getting a home that makes sense for them. And so, that takes time and energy and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Along that line, we talk about the sellers. We have a lot of conversation with sellers, and we also have a lot of conversation with buyers. As Amanda mentioned, a lot of buyers who need our help most might be the ones who cannot afford our help, because they are first-time home buyers or different reasons, or they don't quite understand the value of a buyer agency.
Right, because they don't even understand the complexity of the transaction, which, especially in the Bay Area, is very complex. I mean, we can be, if you're talking about a condo in a big building, you can have something like, say, 700 pages of information you're going through and trying to explain to somebody who all of this is brand new to them. So that they're not going to get that level of explanation with a limited service situation.
Yeah, so what I'm afraid of is people who need our help most don't understand the value of it, because all the talks of now they have to pay their commission, now they decide not to have a buyer's agent, or they go for a very like transactional type of buyer's agent. That's really for someone to make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million investment, one of the largest investment in their lives. We're saying, sorry, go ahead, do it on your own, because guess what? Otherwise, you have to pay me. I mean,
it just doesn't seem great. But I'm hopeful that because there's a lot of smart people in this business who do the majority of the business, that we will be wading through all of this information and we will find the best way to do this and make sure that people are informed and understand. And those people that do need the help, we will help to find the pathway, whether it be folding the money into a loan, having the seller concessions, but that we can work within the framework. But as we've said, for now, it's a bit confusing.
It's more than a bit confusing. It's very, very confusing.
Everybody's confused.
We tried our best trying to understand what's happening, trying to explain to you what's happening. But that, we are still confused from time to time.
Right. I mean, and the number of webinars that we've been through with the MLS, with the CAR, with the NAR, with our brokerage, with our friends and network people. I mean, we're doing the best we can to educate ourselves and to educate those around us. Yeah. But, what I think will be interesting is after August 17th, when these rules go into place and we've had some time to work through that and close some deals, then we'll come back to you, our lovely listeners, and we will give you our third installment of the NAR discussion. And that should be an interesting one to say, okay, now what ended up happening? What was our experience working through those transactions? And we're excited to bring you that information in the future.
Yes, and I think by then we have far less confusion.
Yes.
I hope.
Yes.
And we would know how to handle the situation, and hopefully there will be more clarity all around.
Yeah, and in the interim, if you have any questions at all about this or anything else, of course, real estate related, do reach out to us at info@thebayinsider.com, and we will be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the future.
See you next time.